Ice cold beverage. Yeah, we're live. It is 10 o'clock in the AM here. Not so sunny California. I think we got a little bit of rain last night, which is the first time in, I don't know, 10 or 15 years probably. But today we want to talk about turbo Hemis. And the reason for that is because let's face it, the LS guys, they get all of the attention. But the reality is that the Hemi, and I did almost all of my testing for the Hemi stuff on the earlier Hemis before they went to what I call the Gen 4 Hemi. I guess it's still technically a Gen 3 Hemi, but the newer version with VVT and stuff. And the Eagle and Apache heads and all those, which are better motors. I mean, because it's like comparing in LS speak, these. Hello, what are you doing? Hello, did you guys bark at the squirrels and stuff that are out there? Huh? Did you go see? It's like comparing a cathedral port to a rec port version of the LS. We know. What? Are you insistent? Come here. Hello. Say hi, Bruno. Come here. The later Hemi heads, much better. They flow a lot more. But even the early ones, which I see way more often in the wrecking yard, you see a lot of them. Whenever I go to even the local wrecking yards down by West Tech. Oh, but I thought I'd just pet you. Where's your brother at? Brady. What? What are you doing? I know. Go find. Hey, where's your moose at? Go get your moose. Go get the moose. Go get it. Hey, where's your moose? Go get it. Go get your moose. Anyway. The later Hemis, better heads, but even the earlier ones have really good heads. So they're the equivalent of LS stuff, which means that when you go to do a Hemi, you do the same thing. If you go get a Hemi from the wrecking yard, there are a couple things we want to talk about, but basically what you want to do is do a cam and springs on a Hemi, and good things start to happen because they have a good intake manifold. Doesn't matter whether you have a truck or the Magnum or the SRT. They have good intake manifolds. They flow a lot. They work in a good RPM range, a lot like a truck does on an LS. Those work really well. They have plenty of head flow. And in the case of the Hemi, I would argue that if you go get a Hemi from a car or a truck like a Ram, you're starting off with something that's going to be bigger than most LS things. Excuse me. When I go to the wrecking yard and get an LS, 99% of them are going to be a 4.8 or 5.3. Not that either one of those is a bad choice, but the Hemi is going to be a 5.7. So it's going to be better already because it's going to be bigger. Now, you're not going to compare a 5.7 Hemi to a 5.7 LS because a 5.7 LS only came in cars and very few. It came in Corvettes, Camaros, GTOs and G8s or something like that. Relatively speaking, a handful of cars. Whereas when you look at the truck stuff, there's millions of trucks. That's why when I go to the wrecking yard, I see a dozen LS motors that are in trucks and see zero that are in any cars. There's no Corvettes there. There's no Camaros. If we see any of those, they're going to be earlier ones that are non-LS deals or V6s. We see some V6 stuff sometimes. But not even a lot of those. So it's a lot easier to find the smaller LSs, but when you find the Hemi, you're going to find a relatively bigger, like a 5.7, because as we know, a 5.3 LS makes more than a 4.8 LS does. A 5.7 makes more than a 5.3 does. And then, so you'd have to step up to a 6-liter to be comparable to the 5.7 Hemi. If you're looking at the LS stuff, you'd have to step up to a 6-liter, which are harder to find. If you do find them, they're really the same price. But if you go source them outside, people want more for 6 liters than they do want for the 5.3s and 4.8s because those are a dime a dozen. They're you can find them everywhere. The 5.7 Hemi starts off, like I said, very good. Head flow, intake manifold, displacement. Put some ring gap in it like we do with the LS stuff, and then add boost to it. And to give you an idea on a series that I did for the guys at Hot Rod, we ran one of these 5.7 Hemis from a truck, and it made like 375 or 380 horsepower, and over 400 foot-pounds, like 415 or 420 foot-pounds. So it's a good bit over, a lot more than a 4.8 and more than a 5.3. And so it does very well starting off. This thing made 570, 580 foot-pounds at just 8 pounds. And at 10 pounds was a good bit over 600, like 625, and up near 700 foot-pounds of torque. So just putting the turbo on a stock, Hemi, obviously, as we said, good things happen. When we did a modified one, and by modified one, I mean something that where we put, basically a camshaft in, a cam and springs in, where we're over 400 horsepower, making that kind of power. I think this one was about 425 or something like that. And, right away we ran this thing at 9 pounds, and then we ran it at 11 pounds, and it's up near 800 horsepower and over 800 foot-pounds at 11 pounds. So just like with and it's actually slightly under 11 pounds, but it's just like the LS, and really just like every other motor, because what happens is when we have a naturally aspirated motor like that Hemi that has good heads, a good intake manifold, and make sure to put ring gap in it, when it has those things going for it and you start adding boost, you just start multiplying out what's there. And it has a lot of good things there, particularly when you add a camshaft, because it responds so well, because you already have the other two things that you need. You need the three things that make power. Displacement obviously helps, but heads, cam, and intake manifold. And when you already have two of those and you're only lacking one of those, that's when you get big gains from a camshaft. So a camshaft upgrade on the Hemi does what it does on an LS. We just need to get, I would argue, we need to get more and better cams for the Hemis, just like we've been saying for years. And now, guys are, wanting to do that and bringing that to market. Particularly the guys at Ryan Tooley Racing have stepped up. They're offering camshafts for the later ones, for the Gen 4, the VVT stuff. And they have a lot of good cams that make a lot of power. I'm hoping that they introduce stuff for the earlier ones, because just like I argued for years with the with the 4.8s and 5.3s, that those are the ones that people get more often than not. Because, a 6-liter definitely makes more power, 6.2 or 7-liter, and you can concentrate. Oh, we're going to concentrate on these super high end ones. That's great for the dozen or 100 or 1,000 or whatever it is, people that had those. That's great, and they may want to upgrade them, but there's millions of trucks, and there's way more. Like I never see I may have seen. I don't even know if I've seen one late model Hemi at a wrecking yard. We see them online available, but they're fairly expensive. I see a lot of, relatively speaking, not as many LSs, not as many as I see LSs, but I do see lots of Hemis there. I see them in the cars, and I see them in the trucks, which is unusual because we don't see the car LSs there at all. We see lots of truck stuff, but we see and also in the Jeeps, because they use the Hemis in those as well. And so we do see that. The one thing I can say about the Hemi stuff, and this is more, I think, more problematic than the things we encounter with LSs that have potential. When we go to the wrecking yard and try to scoop one of these up, I like to get it from a car that's been wrecked, like hopefully in the back. And then that way it was running when it got wrecked, and it got totaled, and it got put into the wrecking yard. So the motor's probably good. That's usually a good thing to go by. If the thing looks perfect, then you're starting, well, is the motor bad? And this is particularly the case with Hemis, because Hemis have a couple of problems, and they're related. One of them is that these early Hemis tended to lose valve seats. And then when they do, they break a valve and a piston, and then it's kind of catastrophic failure. And it deposits a ton of stuff, as I've talked about before, into the intake manifold. And so if you take an intake manifold off of one of these Hemis that have kind of blown up, and you shake it, it's just full of various parts, pistons and valves and all kinds of things. And it's hard to get it all out. So you have to make sure that you get all of that stuff out before you would run it again, because more than one person, more than 10, probably more than 100 people have put these things on a car, on a motor, only to destroy that new motor. by new, I mean some other kind of wrecking yard motor, but it didn't come with an intake. They bought that or got it from a buddy or whatever and put an intake manifold on, but the intake manifold had parts in it. And when all of the things are happening and the motor's going a wide open throttle and stuff, it only takes one or two small pieces of these things to get in there and get lodged in the piston or hang a valve open. And then obviously you have a broken motor again. The same thing can be said a little bit with the piston crowns on the Hemis are not as thick as they are with an LS. So ultimately, I don't think a Hemi can be taken to the extreme power limits that an LS can because of that piston deficiency. But what had happened early on is that weakness of the piston was credited with all sorts of damage and destruction from all these Hemis. They blame that on everything, basically. Oh, the Hemis blow up because of that piston. Where I think very few people ever got to a point where that was the issue. They didn't put ring gap in it, so they blame the piston did break because they snapped a piece of the piston off because they stuck a ring, and that's what's going to happen to a piston. It's going to happen, you're going to break any kind of piston with detonation, and that's what they did. Or like they did with the ring gap, they heated it up, the ring pinches together, it grabs in the bore, it snaps a piece of the piston off, and go, oh, those pistons are not strong enough. Well, they're not strong enough to overcome your knuckleheadedness by not putting ring gap in it. And then also to compound that even further, you have problems where, okay, you didn't put ring gap in it, and also you don't have the ability to tune it. So if you have too much timing or not enough fuel, and you have this ring gap issue, those things like compound on each other and create problems where you break stuff. And then they blame it on the not strong enough particular part, in this case, the crown of the piston. Oh, those Hemis are just junk because the pistons are no good. Well, we've done 4-digit power level stuff. When you prep it properly, when you put ring gap in it, and we're able to tune it, we put the right amount of air fuel, in the 11s. We put the right amount of timing in for the octane that we have. We run a good intercooler. We do all the things right. And then getting to the limit of that piston is a whole different thing, just like it was with the LS. Oh, those things break at 8 pounds or 10 pounds. What they're really saying when they were saying that back in 2009 or 2010 is that I've broken one at that level. Yeah, you can. If you have NA timing on it and you try to run 10 pounds of boost, particularly if you then don't add enough fuel because you're trying to run it with stock injectors and you break it, you didn't break it because it's a problem with the motor or because the cast piston or the cast rod or the powder metal rod is too weak. Your approach to it was too weak and you didn't give it the things that it needs to. And when you give it those things, where you can take these things is amazing. Like I said, the Hemi's good. You just have to walk through these potential problems with the valve seat. Make sure you add ring gap. Make sure you tune it right, like you do with any combination, and you can make some real serious power with the Hemis. They want to make power, and you add the right things, and they do. We're gonna start a poll. Is Turbo Hemi better than the Turbo LS? I think I know where this is going. So as an announcement, I have cams available, as always. The low buck truck camshaft and the Truck Plus camshaft. So guys wanting to make a little bit more power, I'm going to be testing both of those cams again on a 6-liter, and hopefully we're doing some stuff with the 6-liter. I also have shirts available. I have wrong cam shirts in blue and red. So if you guys are interested in that, I'll put my email down. Send me an email. I can give you all the details on that. And I will have the store will be up and working, or the website will be up and working here before too long. So we're celebrating that. Springfield, Ohio's in the house. Eric, what's going on? Dennis, Hemi for the win. Yep, we are live. Columbia, wow, nice. The real Cali. Need more Mopar and Hemi stuff. Yeah, like I said, I'm a fan. I'll just take the LS. Y'all can have the Hemis. Yeah, you can pick what you want. Aaron, what's going on? Better turbo for a street-driven 306 small block Ford with a 400-ish NA crank, looking to achieve 650 to 800 wheel horsepower. I think a Precision 7675 makes more than, at least the one that I had, makes more than the VS 7875 did. The Precision turbo that I had would do like 12 or 1300. And Brian's told me that they've made even more with that. I've never tried to turn it up all the way to see what the end was. But for 800 horsepower, like my Gen 2 VS Racing or the next gen stuff, which I think is even beyond what I have, it will do 800 wheel horsepower. I'm in the middle of a build, 6-liter LQ9, 30 over, ARP head studs, 243 heads, 78, 75. All that's good. That's all good stuff. Just got my 4L80E all bolted up. Good. FRP cam for racing. Oh, Flynn Ryan performance cams. Yeah, I don't know what that is. Follow a guy on Facebook, and he has a BG64 Hemi. It's making 1700 horsepower, stock block with no cement. Not sure how long it will live, but it's pushing a D150 into the 4s and the 8th. Yeah, that is a lot of power. I didn't know what the block limitation was on those. What should the ring gap be in a blown LS? 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. So if it's a 4-inch bore, it multiplies 4 times 6.5, and you get the number that you get. 4 times 6 is 24, like around 28 or so, 28 thousandths. Which heads make more power with boost, LS heads or Hemi heads? That's not the right question that you're asking. You should ask which motor, what combination makes the more NA power, whatever two combinations you have, and then boost just multiplies that. It's not the heads that are doing that. The heads can support a given amount of power, but it depends on which Hemi heads you pick, and it depends on which LS heads you pick. Brandy, yeah, you can order a low buck truck cam. I put my email in there, so send me an email. 50-50 pull. Yeah, not anymore. It's 62% now on the yes side. And is free shipping at Northeastern Canada? No, I ship in the continental United States right now. We're working on shipments to Canada. Richard, I find it hard to believe that people would make these mistakes and blame the engine parts. Then are you just brand new to people? Is that what the deal is? Because they do. That's very, very common. That's been common. That's been a common theme on every engine family since the beginning of time. I remember people telling me that Honda rods aren't any good. The modular Ford rods, oh, they'll only, or the pistons, they're only good for 400 horsepower. No, they're not. Because, and the way that happened is because somebody broke something at or near that power level, and so people want absolutes. Oh, well, these will only do that. No, they won't. They'll do a lot more than that because you made a mistake when you did it, and now you're blaming the thing. You're putting some sort of ceiling on it that cast pistons are only good for this much, or these powdered metals or cast rods are only good for this much. And we know that that's not the case. It's just that they didn't know that that was the case at the time because they detonated the motor or did something else that was wrong. And then they blamed the motor. What should the ring gap be in a 6-liter blown LS? 28 thousandths. Is there a direct correlation with runner length and where the intake will make power? Yes. Yeah, runner length definitely affects the effective RPM. Oh, Rich. Okay. I can't recognize sarcasm in a text. You got to put the little sarcasm emoji. I don't know what that is, but if there was one, that would be good. is I look at there's no better than turbo to better NA will be better turbo. It's all about. I agree. You don't know how good your motor is until you turbocharge it. Or at least you don't know how much better it can be. Flying Ryan Performance. Yeah, you can keep saying it, but I still don't know who that is. I luckily picked up 2 Eagle Hemis for $300. Someone had some motors from a dealership since the motors were under warranty. They both wiped the cams though. I think the heads are worth it anyway. Yeah, they definitely are. I mean, if you have Eagle heads, those are essentially race heads. I mean, look at the flow rates on an Eagle head. It's a lot. I think I'd vote Coyote over LS or Hemi for the best turbo platform. Okay, that's the great thing about the country that we live in. You get to pick the thing that you like. If you blow up an LS, it's 500 to 750. If you blow up a Gen 3 Coyote, it's 5,000. I decided I'm going to do a Turbo 5.9 Magnum. Okay, since there's a dime a dozen, it won't matter if it blows up. And then when I get some tuning experience, Hemi's all the way. I see lots of Magnums in the wrecking yard, that's for sure. Both the 5.2s and the 5.9s. Any word on dynoing to build it yourself? Nope, no words on that yet. They did send me some flanges. Building an L33 for an 85 Maserati by Turbo. That's weird. I was just thinking about, I was sitting at the light. I was dropping some cams off at UPS. And this was yesterday. And I was sitting at the light and I was thinking, you know what I haven't seen in a long time? I haven't seen a Maserati by Turbo. Because I remember I was dating this girl and we went to this party, a dinner party or something with her friends. And one of the girls there was talking about her car. And I'm like, I said, sounds like a Maserati by Turbo. She said, yeah, that's what it is. I said, I have never met anybody that's owned one or that knows what that is, let alone somebody that's owned one. She said, oh no, it's really cool. And so naturally and my girlfriend thought I was hitting on her, but my friend and I were both like, Maserati by Turbo. You have no idea how cool that is. Anyway, going NA and looking for 430-ish horsepower at the crank. What would be a good build with stock 799 heads rather than have top end horsepower rather than have low end? My cam in an L33, typically with headers on it, typically makes like 425. So that camshaft and springs and tuning will get you there. If you want more peak power and you want to give up some of the low speed power, like the low buck truck camshaft makes better power up to about 5,000. And then the truck plus cam makes better power above that. 99% of the people are way happier with as much as an extra 25 or 30 foot-pounds of torque offered by the low buck truck camshaft. So that's the one that I would recommend to you. And you'll get to that number that you want, at least at the flywheel, just by adding the cam and springs. And thank you for your support. Fighting exhaust studs on a 6.2 this morning. That's pretty common on high mileage LS stuff. We've had to, and Troy was helping me. And by helping me, I mean, he was doing most of the work, welding nuts on these things and then extracting them out. It was on the 4.8 heads, which I should have just thrown the heads away, given the amount of work that we had to do to them. But I wanted to make that one work that was all damaged, and we ended up doing that. But it took a lot of work. But the broken studs is a common thing. The exhaust studs or bolts. Good stuff. I want a supercharged Coyote. Love my Turbo LS, but the Coyotes are cool. I agree, and they sound good. We put the right exhaust on them, and they sound awesome. Want a Turbo 5.9 Grand Cherokee? That's good. Turbo anything is good. FRP, they built some cams you might want to try. Okay. Was that a Dodge Turbo 4-cylinder in the biturbo? No, a Maserati biturbo was a turbocharged V6, a twin turbo V6. I put under board heads on small block Chevys quite a bit, but is there an issue putting a 3.9 bore cylinder head from an LS on an LS2? I have a short block with no heads. Underboard heads. You mean smaller chambers? Is that what you mean? On small block Chevys? Quite a bit. But is there an issue putting 3 9-bore cylinder heads from an LS1 on an LS2? No, that's fine. Because actually, you can put the... Are you putting 241 heads on there? That's fine. I mean, look at what they do. They put a 243, a 799 head, which is way bigger than the bore size is on a 5.3 and a 4.8. So they put oversized bores on, or oversized chambers on undersized bores, which is the wrong way to go. And you can also do it the other way. So you can, lots of guys running 706 heads on 6 liters, and so that's even worse than what you're talking about. Richard, have you ever dynoed an NPI 2-valve 4.6 with a PI top swap? I haven't done a stock one where we've taken stock PI stuff and put it on the non-PI, but I did a non-PI where we did ported PI heads and then a PI intake manifold, and then we also did cams, and those videos are up on that. Good correction on which heads are better. Yeah, it's not Ron, the thing is that those kinds of questions are never universal. Is Hemi better than LS? Well, we got to get specific about the thing that we're talking about. You know, when people are arguing about which thing is better, oh, Ford's better than Chevy. Well, which Ford is better than which Chevy? Because there's lots of bads on both of those, and there's lots of goods on both of those. And so if you're comparing a good to a bad, that sort of comparison can kind of go either way. Car only weighs 2,300 pounds. Yeah, that's nice and light. A Maserati biturbo would be an engine that would be a other guy's engine that I would really like to run on the engine dyno. And even though I know that there's no aftermarket for it, and everything that we did would have to be some sort of custom thing, but it'd still be cool just because it's cool. I like them cheap. Hemis are not cheap. Hemis are the same price at the wrecking yard as an LS is. So getting a Hemi from the wrecking yard is the same as getting an LS. The cams, I think, are more money, though. There's no low buck truck camshafts for Hemis right now. Love my low buck truck. Still need to make a sound video for you. Paid $500 for the L33. That's a good deal. That's an all aluminum motor for $500. That's like a race motor, man. 2.5 carb twin turbo blow through V6. So do you still have the biturbo motor? Can you clip some of your chats into short 9 or 12 minutes videos? I don't have time to sit and watch for an hour. You don't have to watch for an hour. What you should do is you should watch for the first 10 or 15 minutes, because that's where I talk about whatever subject matter is. And then all the rest of it is question and answer. So it's me engaging with the audience. So if you don't want to watch that part, that's fine. But you can go and just watch the very beginning of that. And I have made some of those into regular 10 or 12-minute videos. Going from 93 to E85, do you have an idea on average percentage power gains throughout the RPM band? Motor is a single overhead cam V8 port injected. I don't normally use percentages, but when we go from, we normally use 91. But when I run a supercharged or turbocharged V8 kind of combination, it's not unusual to get somewhere between 25 to 35 horsepower going from pump gas to E85. That's without any timing change. That's just the fuel. And then you can get more from timing and or boost. It's up to person's flavor. Yeah, you like what you like. I mean, I understand that I get lots of people in this industry that laugh that I like Chevy Sprint turbos, but what do they know? When I see a guy sitting there with a turbo LS Corvette or Camaro or C10 truck or whatever, and I have a turbo Sprint there that I've modified, to me those are the same things. Yeah, one of them might make 1,000 horsepower or whatever, and that's fine. But to me, that's not the more thing. I don't look at it that way. I look at it as we had something and then we made it better. And that person did exactly the same thing to their thing. this whole like, mine runs 8s or 7s or 3s or whatever it is. That's not my thing. Personally, I don't think Hemis are expensive as people make them out to be. Like I said, a Hemi is the same price at a wrecking yard as an LS is. So that starts out, but camshafts are definitely more expensive on a Hemi than they are on an LS. 706 is on an LQ4 boost, and it's mint. Yep. Ford Pinto versus Chevy Monza. You know, I actually think, Matt, I think I like the Pinto on that one. The Monza is used like, and has been for years and years and years, used extensively at Bonneville. They've used those for some reason. They have gone to that one. But the Pinto just has more flavor to me. If you want the old engine, we could work something out. It has 18,000 kilometers on it. Where are you at? Are you in Australia or Canada or somewhere? Where are you at? Ever work Offenhauser IndyCar motor? No, no, I've never run one of those. I have seen one of those at what dyno was I at where a guy had one of those? I think that was maybe the guy that did the red line fuel injection stuff. Lance, I think was his name. I think he might have had an Offie over at his place. Richard, have you seen the adapter plates to put the Hellcat supercharger on an LS? I have, and I need to get back in touch with somebody because we talked about getting together to run one of those. Dennis, more like 3%. 3% of what? Does your junkyard have a carry it for half price? Oh, so if we can like actually physically carry it ourselves, that ours doesn't do that. In fact, they have just now also gone to, they basically have kicked all the guys out that go in there and do stuff for people. You know, you pay a guy to pull a motor out, and now they're doing it because they want that money too. They want all the money. Richard, do you think a 454 could spool a turbo I picked up from a 12-liter Mack? Yeah, because if you look at the horsepower output of that whatever motor is in that Mack truck, it's probably not going to be very high. So I don't think that would be an issue. But very rarely anymore do I recommend people, unless it's something that you have, and if you have that already, you could try it and see what happens. That turbo is not designed for what you're doing, and it's not going to be anywhere near optimized. That being said, it will make boost. But, you know, these turbos new are so inexpensive now that you could just get the turbo that does what you want for pretty inexpensively. I mean, it's not free, but I don't get wrecking yard turbos anymore. Hemis are cheaper at most of the yards because of an LS markup. I haven't seen that. We don't see that in our wrecking yards. TFS 215 heads, 225 only flow another 15 CFM. Is it worth the swap? It depends on what you're trying to do. If are you at the point where you've used up all of the flow rate of the 215 head? That'd be kind of hard to do. I don't see very many people doing that and then going, you know what I need is our combination is limited by the head flow. So an extra 15 CFM, assuming that we have the camshaft to take advantage of where the 15 CFM comes from in the lift range, which is probably going to be at the peak lift, is your combination in that situation. More often than not, it's not. I learned from a ton of questions asked here. Yeah, there's something to be said for the right question. See, that's unique. A Chevy Sprint Turbo. That's what I like. Yeah, you got to do your own things, man. 5.7 Hemi beats a 5.3, but for those not swapping engines, instead just buying a running driving car is a $15,000 2010 5.7 325 horse Challenger better than a 2010 15,000 horsepower 6.2 425 horse Camaro. So you're making a case for the LS because that's what you like? Is that what you're doing? Because the comparison, you won't find any 6.2s in a wrecking yard. I mean, at least I never have. And if you're going out to buy a car that's $10,000 or $15,000, then that's not what this discussion is about. With your Fox Body 302, Extreme Energy 274, it was eek with no tune. Yeah, well, it's no tune. For most of its life, it had a mass air meter calibrated for a specific injector, and that's it. And then also I had for a time, I had a crane interceptor on it, which we could manipulate sensor signals from and tune it that way. It also ran for a long time with an FMU on it and 24-pound injectors. And then at the end of its career, had for very, very, very short period of time, had a Kenny Bell chip in it. What makes the 85 give more of a return on higher compression motors? Maybe the cooling effect is more pronounced. Borg Warner is the Mac Turbo from the 2000s. I'm currently building a 5.7 LS1 ProCharge engine for 99 vet with 900 horsepower. What connecting rod and piston do you recommend for a 99 5.7 LS1 for 900 horsepower? The stock stuff will work. You're getting near the limit of where we like to run that motor at. But if you want to put rods and pistons in it, the Summit Pro LS stuff is a good choice. That's a small 400 horsepower turbo with a huge exhaust side. Probably not the best option. That's normally what diesel stuff is, because they're not making a lot of horsepower. They're making a lot of torque, and so they don't have to have a compressor side that supports like 800 horsepower. It'll support 800 foot-pounds because it's happening at such a low RPM. You know, if you have 400 horsepower happening at 2,000 RPM, that's a pretty big torque number. But they won't support a high horsepower number, particularly at a high engine speed. Got it for free, so it's no big deal. Yeah. You're wrong. We must listen to the horsepower rating on rods. I want to go to the connecting rod horsepower rating either website or discussion. And one of the other things that happens on the connecting rod thing, because that's funny, you see also the Gen 3 versus Gen 4 connecting rod thing. Oh, I got to get a Gen 4 motor because they'll handle more power. Good. You're looking at doing a 600 horsepower turbo LS. Either one of them will do that without any problem at all. A Gen 4 is better. It's definitely stronger, but you're not there. It's just like with the head conversation. You haven't taken advantage of, if you haven't taken advantage of what that head has to offer, you don't need to have more cylinder head, you know? Let's see. My eBay S475 was $240. Nice. That's cheap. 6 PSI on a stock bottom end 302 with ungap rings. How common is that? I don't know. Are you doing it? It doesn't matter to me what other people are doing. If you're doing it, that's fine. And then how long are you doing that for? Richard, did you ever test one of the old Nissan engines that came in the 350s, a Z350 in the 80s? It's a big inline six. Heard they make big power with a big turbo. I don't know what an 80s Z350 is. I'm not familiar with that. I'm pretty familiar with inline six cylinders, particularly the L series stuff, because I've owned a couple of it and still own. I have a 240Z and I owned a 260, and I've done a few things with those motors. But are you talking about the diesel one, the one that they use the crank for to make the stroker L series stuff? But again, turbos on motors are multipliers. So whatever is there, if it's 200 horsepower, it multiplies that. If it's 300, it multiplies that, you know, and so on and so on. Nobody's swapping a Hemi in an LS equipped car, but a lot of guys are swapping LS engines into all sorts of cars. Hellcat 6.2 is the only exception. I know, but the popularity doesn't necessarily make one better than the other from an engineering standpoint and from a potential standpoint. And also wouldn't matter even if one was way better and less expensive and better in every way. But if the Hemi is the thing that you like, then you pick the Hemi. Or the 4.7, the pre-Hemi. 2010 5.7 Hemi is rated at 375, but I have beat every 6.1 Hemi I've ever raced, and they're rated at 425. I have long tube headers and 85mm throttle body on my 5.7. So long tubes and a throttle body, you're saying, overcomes the 50 horsepower deficit? And is a 6.1 Hemi for some reason heavier than yours? Does it have different gearing? Are there other things? Off the IndyCar engines are like nothing you've ever seen. No head gasket, particularly unlimited boost as long as the fuel has the octane to pull it. And they weren't shy about octane when they were running those. How do I make power with a 351 Cleveland? High energy cam. Yeah, a 351 Cleveland does what every other motor does. A 351 Cleveland, I don't know if you have 2V or 4V heads on it, but 4V heads flow more and they make more power. So more airflow. There's lots of aluminum heads available for 351 Cleveland. So you can get good head flow and you get less weight. There are a lot of different intake manifolds, relatively speaking, available for 351 Clevelands, and lots of different cam profiles available for 351 Cleveland. So you can make lots of power. I mean, they made a ton of power back in NASCAR and drag racing and stuff because the head had so much flow relative to other things that were out at the time. Sean, you're upset you missed the ZR1 discussion. I just had a discussion with that this morning with Brian Tooley about that. And I just found out that, and some of the guys had mentioned this, that when they ran that top speed of 233 miles an hour, they went to the rev limiter, which is past the power peak. Now I've been searching the interwebs for the dyno curve to see how much fall off there is, to see what the drop in power is at 8,000 versus say 7,000, wherever this thing makes peak power. And then we start talking about, did they change the cam timing for the turbo motor versus the NA? You know, it's all this bench racing stuff. The Mac 12 liter I have is for an 04 Volvo and was a BorgWarner unit. There are more than 36 twos for sale at Junkyards in the Sacramento area in the $3,500 range. Not knocking that. Why aren't the 6.2s are always more money because they're aluminum. A 6.1 would be probably more scarce. A 6.1 Hemi would be more scarce than a 6.2, right? I'd like to look at production numbers for that and see. Not knocking the Hemis, just don't see the comparison. Good, that's it. But you got to realize, Brad, that that's a subjective thing. You feeling a certain way about something is an opinion. It's not a reality. It's not an absolute. I voted no. Sorry, Hemi guys. Good, and we want people to do that. You gotta do what you feel, man. On a Gen 5 LT1, if you're on an aftermarket cam, does anything else need to be done? All my Camaro friends listen too much to shops and think they need a bunch of other stuff. I'm not sure what they need. They have pretty good head flow, so and they have pretty good intake manifolds, but the other things that are available will make more power. If you look at Brian Tooley's website, he has a bunch of dyno sheets on various things that they sell for the LT1. You can look and see what they do. Okay, this cam does this much. And then when we added an intake manifold or ported heads, there's more and more and more, but it depends on where you want to get to. And then also at some point, particularly with cams and intake manifolds, what are you willing to trade? Because if you put an MSD intake manifold on, is it going to trade power? Certainly well with compared to the truck manifold. I don't know how bad the trade is on the LT1. Is the LT2 a whole bunch better? Does it trade? You know, the short runner manifolds, how much do they trade? All that stuff. Excuse me. The thing with diesel turbos is the exhaust side. It's usually larger than needed. Yeah. Yeah, the 6.1 Hemi is rare, right? Not knocking the Hemi, the LS is more ubiquitous. Well, if you look at the market for an LS and a Hemi, the LS market is a million times bigger. I'd like to see them do the top speed test again with the ZTK Aero, just to see how much it takes away. Brian told me that the previous ZR1 they limited top speed because of the tire. I didn't know that. I hadn't read anything about that. A lot of Gretsch Hemi Mustangs. See a lot of 5.7 Eagles near me for 800 to 1500. Some have transmissions attached as well. But honestly, with a stock rating of 395, just add another 10 PSI boost, you got a pretty stout motor. It is a lot. If you just put ring gap and stuff in those, and just like with an LS, a cam and springs and boost, and you're making a lot of power. Are the stock push rod, springs, rockers fine for mount cam? I don't know about the springs on that. The LT might have a 550 or 560 lift spring in it. I'm not sure. I think a mount cam and long tubes on top of what he has will get him to 500 wheel horsepower. He has an MSD. Okay. The LS is cheaper to mod. Yep. The big issue is chassis size. Massive for our old metal Mopars are heavy compared to Ford or Chevy. I think a Hemi probably might be. Is a Hemi going to be harder to fit than other stuff? Going to have my first project soon. Kind of run a big block Chevy on a 10-bolt rear end. By the way, I daily drive a carb, or is it as much of a hassle as others say? I daily drove a carbureted motor for years and years and years and years and years. And then in my Z, it was a multiple carburetor motor and drove it every day. It was the only car that I had. So I drove it every day. Drove it for years and years. So this thing about carburetors going out of tune or not working or whatever, I didn't see that. They used them for decades in OEM applications. And so, I think that some of that at least are guys that are EFI guys trying to put, that's old technology. They're as bad as boomers are for saying the reverse. And it's just nonsense. Also fewer G3 Hemi tuners around. That's what they told us at GM school too. The tires aren't rated for more mile an hour, so they'll limit it with the ECM. Brian and I were talking about that. We wondered, now that they've shown that this car will go 233, are they limiting them or are they allowing them to go that fast? Like, was this one that they turned the speed limiter off, or is there no speed limiter? I'm curious to see, because now that they've done that and guys are going to go out and do that and cause problems because they're not going to do it safely. I just wonder what the issue is with that. Yeah, Eric, I will be on tonight. Yes, it is. My radiator's in the trunk to fit medium turbos on my G3 Hemi. Gen 3 Hemi Hellcat is supposed to be a stellar twin turbo. Carb motor sound better. Tires are better now. Yeah, I mean, they have the tires that they have on it are high-speed deals. And if you look at tires that Michelin stuff, and I'm sure that they're Cup Sport whatever's, because if you look at what a Bugatti has and those kinds of things, they have the very high-speed tires. Did you have a trans or rear end temp issue with running Silver State? Honestly, don't know. And I've had that question asked a lot. Like, how is the rear end temp? I don't know. We never even looked at it. I didn't have a sensor in it, nor did I have one in the trans. But the trans was a manual trans, and I don't think that, I think we have less of a problem with a manual trans. At least this was my rationale. We had less of a problem with the manual trans, the T5, than we would with an automatic. So I wasn't a fan of running automatics sustained like that for long periods of time. Maybe it wasn't an issue. I don't know. But I I just close these. If I don't look, then it's not a problem. I treated it like we treat LS cam bearings. Can I run a big block Chevy on a 10 bolt? Yes, you can, but you can also break that rear end if you get it to hook up. If it spins all the time, you'll never hurt it. We ran 200 miles an hour in NASCAR without knowing the rear end temp. Do they later have that data, Dan? Were they monitoring trans temp, like the oil temp in the trans, and were they running coolers in those? And what about rear ends too? Were they running coolers in those? Is the Turbo Hemi better than the Turbo LS? 58% saying no, it's not. Have you seen the Hellcat Supercharger? I have. Have you tried gapless rings? I ran gapless rings on my Engine Masters deal. And we have run gas ported rings, but not compared them to anything else. We only started having problems when we put seals near the diff, drag-axle tubes to keep the oil from sloshing. Only then do we add coolers and pumps on the 9-inchers. Did they run, when they were doing super speedway stuff, did they run any additional like capacity in those? Trying to find specs for a stock Gen 5 LT1 springs, but seems like the safe option would be to do a cam and valve springs. The tubes actually work really well as coolers. Okay. Yeah, we were running pretty fast for a long period of time. Not hours on end like NASCAR does. If you can get, non-yellow flag stuff to happen for that long. Is a 502 too much for a beginner? I want to have fun but not kill myself for the first V8. If you're talking about, is this the 10 bolt thing? Oh no, that's not. Yeah, that is a. It depends on, like I said, it depends on how much you want it to hook, and if you want it to hook, it's going to break stuff. I had a guy that ran the Silver State contact me 7 years ago, wanted me to build a C4 Corvette Dana 44 RS for 200 plus. I wanted differential tilt and oil pump. He didn't. It already failed. Did he end up running it? I've had a few of my friends run C4s with carbureted motors in them, and I don't remember if they had cooling pumps on them or not. I'd have to ask. Capacity was the same, but the camber was less, so different housing. Okay. Brakes were a little tiny brakes in comparison to the short track cars. Yeah, because they weren't, I mean, you wouldn't want to be jamming on the brakes on ice cold brakes that you'd been running 200 miles an hour endlessly. They used to have a piece of metal with a V groove cut into it, and they would dip the diff and trans. Somehow could tell what the viscosity at the temp and figure out if they're running hot. I mean, you could at the very least put the temp strips on them and see. That could kind of tell you. At least it would tell you the external temp. I don't know how airflow on that thing affects the temp strips. What I was known for in C4 Corvette world was building bulletproof drag racing Dana 44s. Okay. I would imagine that you'd need a cooler on an IRS at high speed. Factory cars with diff coolers turn the light on at 293 degrees. Didn't want to spend the money. Yeah, I get that. I mean, I don't need that. Well, you don't know if you need that until you know you need that. Nissan engine, talking about is an L28E, has a turbo on it, as big as a beach ball. It makes 1,000 horsepower. So I don't know which one you're talking about because no factory one ever did that. But maybe a race version of that you're talking about. Off topic, is anyone taking over Steve's Dyno spot on Engine Masters? No, Engine Masters isn't a thing anymore. They're not doing that series anymore. Richard, have you ever dynoed a 5.3 versus a 6.0 block with a 4.8 crank? I have not. C4 Dana 44 doesn't hold much gear oil. Pumps and coolers are cheap insurance. Are they running the pumps for those off of the drive shaft, Dan? That's an L20 ET engine, sounds mean too. Yeah, they did well when they were racing those in the Sharp cars that and the electromotive stuff and the stuff that Newman was driving and stuff. They made good power with those. Is there a limit that you can push a small block forward with pedestal mount rockers, hydraulic roller lifters? What's the horsepower limit? You have a Dart 363 with pedestal mount roller rockers. If you have pedestal mount rockers, then you have small bolts on those. I would think that would be spring pressure related. But if you've got a hydraulic roller, that's probably not going to be an issue. I don't think I would try to make a pedestal mount rocker be an 8,000 RPM thing. I think it's going to be spring pressure and RPM related. Once you hit 650 foot-pounds of torque with the big block, a 10 belt will let you know it's not happy. Yeah, they'll tell you. In fact, they'll jump out of the case and tell you. Although I wonder if are the axle splines going to give up before the ring and pinion do? Is a Hemi better than a Turbo LS? 5941. We'll end our poll there. Pumps on a 9-inch run off the pinion gear. Okay. Little tiny pump run off the gear near the pilot bearing. Okay, cool. And do they have a pump that runs out to like an external cooler with lines going to it? Is that what they're doing? Those old Datsun L-Series 6-cylinders were reliable. Change the oil, they go 300,000 miles. Only problem was rust. They rusted even in California. There are areas that they were prone to rust because of the way that they channeled the water. The areas under the battery tray on the early ones, back on the deck lids, they were problematic. Fittings in the 9-inch case, tubes and lines going to a cooler and fitting. Okay, cool. Only 28 spline axles and a 10 bolt. I hear you. I see I got some emails. That's good. I'll be hitting you guys up. Nope, no more Engine Masters. They're not doing that anymore. That was a good show. They did a lot of cool tests. And Steve was a big part of that. And in fact, Steve did Steve and Troy did all of the preliminary testing where they would run stuff just to make sure that the motor was going to be good and cooperate and stuff. Sean, what's the 8% difference? Scrolling back, scrolling. Okay. Milkor, you just ask a question, man. You don't have to throw money at it. Sorry, I was in a work meeting. I am in Canada. It'd be cool to see the bi-turbo motor on a dyno. It would be cool. I like those. Those are cool. Definitely unique. And then just put 2 big turbos on it. I don't know how well if anybody has any experience with those, I don't know how well the head seal and all of that. And you would definitely do it as an EFI one, probably not as a blow through carburetor. Although we could put the CSU 850 on there. That'd be good. 8% difference from a 50-50 split on opinion. Oh, okay. There's an early and late 10-bolt ring. Gear is bigger on the later ones, and the posi cases are not interchangeable. Rob Goss put LS on notice long ago, even with the bonus weight over the rest. What are you talking about? It's a strong bottom end. It's all steady. Does a bi-turbo, did it have factory forged pistons? Richard, have you done 1,000 plus with a Gen 3 Hemi? Yeah, with a turbo we did. With a ring gap on it. It had a cam in it. I'd have to go back and look. I don't think it may have had like the I had the guys at Total Engine Airflow port the heads. So it might have had a ported head. Yeah. Oh, cool. Forged bottom end and 3-valve heads. I didn't know that. For some reason, I was thinking it was a 4-valve head. That is kind of cool. I wonder what the bell housing is like for that. That's always a problem. You just have to build an adapter to it. Richard, is it possible to get a Ford 3.7 V6 out of a Mustang? AMR is making 700 horsepower on a single turbo. Heads flow similar to Coyotes when stock. Murano Racing makes the M122 supercharger adapter for it. That's cool stuff. Oh, the 4-valve head came later. So they did upgrade that. I'm going to go down the rabbit hole on this bi-turbo thing because that's cool. That's like just enough cool. And the thing that I liked about it the most, I mean, obviously it was a bi-turbo, so it was a twin turbo, so that's better than one turbo. But also the Italian car manufacturers did very nice interiors. The leather and stuff that they used in the seats was always pretty cool. When are we going to get a big bang? We won't do a 5.9 Magnum, but I did a big bang 5.7 Hemi that made over 1,000 horsepower. They also experimented with a 6-valve head. Wow. A Ford 3.7 Cyclone might be a good addition. Anything is built right. A nitrous NA 340 can run 9s like the Hellcat, probably with more. What 340 are you talking about? Are you talking about an old 340? Richard, do you think Ford should have offered a 351 in a Fox body? Yeah, I think it would have been a great idea. I think that they should have put, at the least, we should have gotten the Lightning version, but like a 351 Windsor with a little bit more compression, and then the GT40 heads and roller rockers and the GT40 style intake manifold on 351. I think that would have been an easy deal for them to do. Eurospec 4-valve, 2-liter made, 285. Okay. Well, an old bottom end 340. I don't know what you mean. Do you mean a 340 like the LA motors? Because to go 9s in a 340 would be a complete build on a 340 and then lots of nitrous. I didn't want to build a Silver State C4. You can find the 3.7. Yeah, engines are pretty easy to find. Coyotes are plug-and-play swaps in an SN 197 Mustang. Even motor mounts are the same. Cool. How do you figure when to stop on the big bang motors? It depends. Sometimes we've hurt them. Sometimes we ran out of time. sometimes we ran into other issues that we were doing while testing that were time issues. On the 4.8, we tried to rerun it, and then things happened because we tried to rerun it, and we started the run later in the RPM range, and then ended up hurting it then because a stationary load at 900 foot-pounds of torque, it didn't like that. It liked it stationary loads at 400 foot-pounds or 450 foot-pounds down low, and then let the turbo sweep up, and it seemed like it would do that all day long. I'm trying to remember on the Hemi what happened. I don't even know if we broke the Hemi at 1,000, or if we hurt a piston on that. Aren't new Maseratis the same as Ferrari? Some of them are. They use Ferrari engines in some of the Maseratis, but Maserati also did their own back then. On the 5.3, when we did that big bang, I stopped after we made more than the 4.8, I think. I can't remember if we did end up hurting the 5.3 too. I think we bent a rod on that one. X275 Classman 4.0 in the 8th, and Gen 3 Hemi in the Rob Gross Challenger. Okay. I don't know that. I mean, that's cool, but I don't know how that relates to what we're talking about here. What ring gap do you recommend on an LS? You need to do 6.5 thousandths per inch of bore. So like do 28 thousandths. One more minute. 70 C10 6-liter 28-inch tire. Do you have a stall converter in that? I have a truck Norris cam in it, but you want something bigger. So anything you do above that camshaft is going to be a loss in low speed. You're going to be trading power. So do you want more RPM and more power on the top? And do you have a converter in that thing? What has a better torque curve? Gen 3 Hemi or LS? Well, again, it depends on which one you're talking about. Not yet ordering from Circle D. Okay, so if you want to put a lot of camshaft in it, you can make a lot more power. You can put something like that Stage 4 LS3 cam that we ran. And I don't see what intake manifold you have there. So the intake manifold that you have is also going to dictate how much camshaft you want to put in it. Do you have any experience milling lifters? I've never done that. Or are we talking about melling lifters? I have used melling lifters because melling made lifters for a lot of different people. Trailblazer SS intake manifold. Okay, then you can look at, I don't know. There are bigger cams that you can look at. You can look at a red hot cam, a hot rod cam. You could run that bigger cam, but I don't think that I would do that with that particular intake manifold. And on that note, it is time to go. Thank you guys all for showing up. I'll be back tonight.